in the aerospace sector, and I very much valued and appreciated visiting the college on the 11th of November. I greatly value the significant contribution that all colleges make to our economy and society, including Ayrshire College, and recognise the significant financial pressures that the sector is facing. The Scottish Government cannot comment specifically on the financial position of an individual college, such as Ayrshire College. However, the Scottish Funding Council continues to engage closely with the college sector, monitoring financial sustainability and providing appropriate forms of support tailored to the circumstances of individual institutions.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for that answer. Forecasts show that most colleges are not sustainable. Ayrshire College is facing a £2.1 million reduction in core teaching funding over and above the 20% real terms cut since 21-22. This is a huge blow, which is already making the college have to take difficult decisions. Does the Government recognise this, and it must urgently work with the colleges and its trade unions to address these funding challenges and ensure that we both secure jobs and young people's education and make sure these are both protected?
Minister.
Since coming into post, I have greatly valued engagement with Colleges Scotland and with individual colleges and across the Chamber on the challenges facing the sector, but also the huge opportunities. And Ayrshire College is showing leadership with the Prestwick aircraft maintenance limited partnership, providing real-world opportunities where there is significant demand for the opportunities that are available. And I commit again to working across the Parliament on the challenges and opportunities that our college sector faces.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. And at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Rachel Reeves has increased taxes by £26 billion. Under Labour, taxes will be at their highest levels in history. By freezing income tax bands, millions of workers will be forced to hand over even more of their wages. And the Labour Chancellor is not only screwing taxpayers, she's also borrowing even more money, leaving more debt to future generations. And she did all of this, despite saying that she would do none of it. Does John Swinney intend to keep the SNP manifesto promise not to raise tax on Scottish workers?
First Minister.
Obviously the Government is giving consideration to the implications of the United Kingdom budget for the Scottish budget, but the Finance Secretary confirmed this morning that the Scottish Government will not increase income tax rates or introduce any new bans.
Russell Finlay.
John Swinney stood on a manifesto promise to freeze income tax rates and bans.
Let's hear Mr Finlay.
He stood on a manifesto promise not to raise income tax or bans. And the same John Swinney then stood right there and delivered a budget that raised income tax.
How can we trust you?
And then 1 year later,
let's hear Mr Finlay.
1 year later, the SNP again raised income tax. And on November the 6th, when John Swinney was challenged about this broken promise, he had the audacity to claim that this was, quote, not out of kilter with the SNP manifesto. And looking very much like Joe Biden, John Swinney actually seemed to be completely unaware of what he had done. And to make matters worse, Presiding Officer, on November 13th, he then misled Parliament by falsely claiming to have maintained his manifesto commitment. So when John Swinney says or suggests that he won't increase income tax, how can anyone trust a word that he says?
First Minister.
What a wandering lot of drivel that question was.
Thank you.
Mr Finlay makes a habit of coming to this chamber and not reading out the complete paragraphs from party manifestos that set out our position. We set out our manifesto position in 2021, but we said that we had to be mindful of the economic context. Yeah. And the economic context was fundamentally changed by two things. Yeah. One, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which led to a spike in inflation and massive increase in public sector costs. And secondly, the absolute rank and total stupidity of the Liz Truss budget that Russell Finlay supported. That's what changed the landscape.
Russell Finlay.
What a cheek. The master of wandering drivel speaks. This is the guy that broke income tax, raised income tax, broke his manifesto promise twice. You always have to read the small print with the SNP.
Yes.
Scotland's workers, families and businesses deserve to know if more of their hard-earned money is going to be swiped by the SNP. But John Swinney cannot be trusted about any tax rises he's possibly planning. And one group who are increasingly concerned is the Scottish Association of Landlords. They say that Rachel Reeves' new property income tax could be the final straw, and that this could harm tenants by jeopardising the supply of rental properties. Now, Rachel Reeves has handed the SNP the power to introduce and to even increase this tax in Scotland. And given the damage that's already been done by the SNP's rent controls, does John Swinney accept that this new tax could further damage the rental market for tenants?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government has put forward legislation which has been approved by Parliament that introduces rent controls but also enables Scotland to be an attractive market for housing investment, and that is demonstrated by the dialogue the Government is having with the investment sector, and of course any decisions about these issues will be set out in the budget in January.
Russell Finlay.
So the SNP are forcing Scottish taxpayers to constantly pay more and more and more. And before the budget, they'd already set aside around £150 million to end the cap on universal credit for families with more than 2 children. But given Labour's decision to scrap the 2-child cap, the SNP can now spend that money on something else, not on more benefits. There is another way, a common-sense way that would reward hard work and help the economy. We believe that Scottish taxpayers deserve to keep more of their own hard-earned money. They deserve fairness and they deserve a break from higher bills. So will John Swinney instead use that £150 million to instead cut income tax?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I've made it clear that the mission and the purpose of my government is to eradicate child poverty. Now, I welcome the fact that the United Kingdom Government has taken the decision from the 1st of April to abolish the 2-child cap, which was put in place by the previous Conservative Government. It is an atrocious intervention in the benefit system, and I'm glad that my government has shamed the Labour Party into acting on this particular issue.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have also set out on previous occasions that what the Scottish Government will do in the situation that we now face is that the money that we'd allocated to lift the 2-child limit, which was an initiative taken by the SNP Government in the face of votes against such a proposal by Labour MPs in Westminster, that we would allocate that money to reduce child poverty even further than the reducing levels of child poverty in Scotland under this government. So when Mr Finlay attacks me for asking people on higher earnings to pay more in tax, I'm prepared to do that so that I can work to eradicate child poverty, which is the best thing for the future of our country.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. 18 months ago, the people of Scotland got rid of a Tory government that had done so much damage to our country. Clearing their mess was never going to be easy, but UK Labour
Let's hear Mr Sarwar.
Clearing their mess was never going to be easy, but UK Labour choices are making a difference. Yesterday, the UK budget delivered an increase to the minimum wage, energy bills £300 off for those most in need, reinstating the winter fuel allowance and raising the state pension, benefiting 1.1 million pensioners in Scotland, £820 million more for the Scottish Government, with £10.3
Thank you. Let's hear Mr Sarwar.
This is their constituents benefiting with £10.3 billion more since Labour came to power, and the end of the
Question,
two-child
Mr
cap.
Sarwar.
the end of the two-child cap, meaning 450,000 children
Mr.
lifted out
Sarwar.
of poverty across the UK and benefiting.
Mr. Sarwar, you may put a question now. You may put a question now, or I will ask the First Minister to address the comments you've made.
I'm asking the question.
Please do.
You've intervened twice already. Benefiting 95,000 children in Scotland. So will John Swinney. They're heckling poverty reduction. Who would have thought it?
Mr. Sarwar, I have asked you, Mr. Sarwar, in future, when I ask you to put a question at that point. Continue.
So will John Swinney welcome the greatest reduction in child poverty from a single budget, from a UK budget this century?
First Minister.
Utterly ridiculous.
I thought members of Parliament were supposed to keep up with what was said in Parliament. I've already welcomed the abolition of the two-child limit because this government shamed the Labour Party into action in the first place. Labour MPs have been trooping through the lobbies of the House of Commons to vote to keep the two-child limit since they came to office 18 months ago. It's been an absolute disgrace. Now, I'm glad that the Labour Party has realised that there's an election coming in May and that possibly the face of a Labour Party driving up child poverty in the United Kingdom may not be a good look for the Labour Party in Scotland. But what I'm very pleased to say to the people of Scotland is that child poverty is falling in this country, in Scotland, because of the actions of an SNP government.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister is delusional. The SNP had the power to end the two-child cap for 8 years and did nothing. UK Labour scrapped it after 18 months. The sad truth is the SNP preferred the grievance. Now, for 2 years...
Let's hear one another.
Now, for 2 years, John Swinney has argued for income tax to rise in England and Wales. That would have led to a cut in Scotland's budget based on the fiscal framework he himself negotiated. It proves he hasn't got a clue. While he was arguing for Scotland's budget to be cut, I was arguing for more investment, and the UK Labour government delivered. Given that £5.2 billion was received last year and completely wasted by this incompetent and tired SNP government, doesn't it prove we need a change of government here in Scotland so Scots can feel the benefit in our schools, in our hospitals, police and public services?
First Minister.
Oh, he's trying awful hard today to get himself excited. Let me set out to Mr. Sarwar the choices that this government made.
Let's hear one another.
This government decided to prioritise the introduction, the only part of the United Kingdom, of a Scottish child payment. That exists in no other part of the United Kingdom, and we used the resources that we've raised in Scotland to make sure that could be delivered so that child poverty is falling in this country. Secondly, Mr Sarwar talks about the increase in resources that are being made available, and he's right, there's going to be an extra resource funding of £510 million over a 4-year period. The 1-year increase in employers' national insurance contributions in Scotland was estimated to be around £400 million. So there we have it, an average increase in our budget of £127 million eaten up by an increase in employers' national insurance contributions by a Labour government. So what this government will do is what it always does, which is concentrate It will concentrate our public expenditure on the priorities of the people of Scotland. And why does that matter? Well, that matters because it delivers for the people of our country, and secondly, it demonstrates, as was proven by the credit rating agencies, that this country benefits from prudent fiscal management, from prudent financial planning, and that's what an SNP government delivers.
Anna Sarwar.
I think John Swinney needs to cheer up a little bit. An additional £10.3 billion for Scotland's public services. That's a transformative amount of money, but the SNP can't be trusted with people's money. NHS waiting lists remain unacceptably high, our schools falling down international league tables, police numbers cut and rising crime on our streets. It's why Scots are asking, where has the money gone? And that's why we can't risk a third decade of the SNP and John Swinney. So isn't it the case that in May Scots have a clear choice? More wasted money and
Mr.
wasted
Sarwar.
opportunities with John Swinney, or a government that respects your money with me? Police stuck in A&E and courts with John Swinney, or police on our streets and safer communities with me?
Let us hear
Long
Mr. Sarwar.
Lists. They don't want to hear it, Presiding Officer. Long waiting lists with John Swinney, or an NHS fit for the future with me. It's the past with John Swinney, or the future with me and Scottish Labour.
First Minister.
Okay, let's start with waiting lists. And my government's priority is to bring down waiting lists, and particularly long waits. And what is happening between April and October this year is that new outpatient waits of over a year reduced by 17.9%, the fifth consecutive month in which waiting lists were falling for long waits. In the same period, the waiting list size for new inpatient day case procedures over 52 weeks has reduced by 26.1%. So the plan that I put in place, backed by the resources that we've invested, that the Labour Party wouldn't vote for, is now reducing waiting lists in our country. And if Mr Sarwar wants to own the budget of the United Kingdom Government, he has to own its consequences. And the consequences are that today, people's fuel bills are still higher than they were when Labour came to office. They are not going to be lower, as Labour promised. There are going to be job losses in the north east of Scotland, which Anna Sarwar is going to be responsible for because of the actions of the Labour government. So I will invest the people's money wisely in boosting public services and strengthening the economy, and I will leave Anna Sarwar to dream about what he might be able to do if he convinces the people of Scotland when this government is delivering for the people of Scotland.
Thank you. Before we move to question 3, I would just remind members that those in the gallery would like to be able to follow proceedings, and I call Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week I asked the First Minister for the Just Transition Plan for Mossmorran workers that his government promised that it would write 18 months ago. He twice avoided answering that question. Since then, we've had 3 summits in as many days involving the Scottish and UK governments at Fife Council. At none of those has the Scottish Government provided the plan that it committed to write. The Scottish Greens spent years working with the trade unions representing Mossmorran workers and the wider community to produce plans of our own, because we all knew that this day was coming. Now, hundreds of workers face losing their jobs within weeks, and their government has no plan to help them. Can the First Minister please just admit that there is no Scottish Government plan to support the Mossmorran workers, and apologise that his government did not deliver on the commitment they made?
First Minister.
So what the government is doing is taking the learning that we took forward from the issues that we addressed in Grangemouth, where the Just Transition Plan has resulted in a range of different business development opportunities emerging, to apply that in dialogue with the trade unions, interested parties, Fife Council, the United Kingdom Government and the company in taking forward the future of Mossmorran. I very much regret the circumstances that are faced by the workers at Mossmorran, and the Deputy First Minister and the Scottish Government are working assiduously with all interested parties to deliver a future for those affected by the decision that's been taken at Mossmorran.
Ross Greer.
Presiding Officer, wouldn't it have been great if the Deputy First Minister was able to attend these summits with the plan for jobs that her government had committed it would write 18 months ago? These workers have been abandoned by ExxonMobil, and despite knowing about the company's plans to cut and run, there was absolutely nothing from Mossmorran in yesterday's Labour budget. But these workers have also been let down by a Scottish Government which, when push comes to shove, has no new ideas. The Scottish Greens have one we want to put to the First Minister today, though. Grangemouth rightly has a Just Transition Fund, and Unite the Union ensured that as a condition of getting any money from that fund, organisations must offer job interviews to anyone made redundant from INEOS. Will the Scottish Government now do the same for Mossmorran workers?
First Minister.
Yes, I'm happy to confirm that. That agreement that was reached with Unite was announced by me a few weeks ago, and I very much applaud the collaboration that's been taken forward with Unite the Union, who've been partners with the Government in dealing with the situation in Grangemouth and are partners with the Government in dealing with the situation at Mossmorran. Now, I think I picked up Mr Greer correctly in his question, where he made the point that there had been prior notice about the decisions at Mossmorran. Not to the Scottish Government. We had about a week's notice. The United Kingdom Government knew about it for months, and they never sorted it, never fixed it, never addressed it, never intervened like Scunthorpe or any other situation where they decide to intervene. So it just goes to demonstrate that there's one rule for the rest of the United Kingdom and one rule to Scotland when it comes to industrial closures under a Labour government in London.
Question number 4, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what impact the Chancellor's autumn statement will have on Scotland.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as I indicated a moment ago, there will be financial consequences for the Scottish Government's budget as a consequence of the budget yesterday, and I welcome the decision to remove the two-child limit, which the Scottish Government was already planning to mitigate in March of next year. There will, of course, be consequences for the public. Their energy bills will not be cut by the £300 that were proposed by the Labour Party. Energy bills will still be, on average, £340 higher than the Prime Minister promised they would be.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Yesterday's UK budget came after weeks of chaos, dithering and U-turns by the Chancellor amidst an ongoing cost of living crisis, downgrading of UK economic growth every year until 2029 and public finances in a worse state now than when Labour came to power. Does the First Minister agree with Scotland's Chambers of Commerce that the budget's net effect will be to further dial up pressure on businesses, risking our reputation as a magnet for global investment? And does he share my concern that while thousands of Scottish oil and gas jobs are at risk from Labour tax policy, energy bills after this budget next April will still be £340 more per household than the Prime Minister promised a year ago, while UK unemployment has risen by 282,000 on Labour's watch?
First Minister.
Well, President Officer, on Mr Gibbs's last point about unemployment, of course, unemployment is now significantly lower in Scotland than it is in the rest of the United Kingdom, and I welcome that indication of good performance in the Scottish economy. Indeed, that point was of good economic performance in Scotland was recognised by Moody's and Standard & Poor's in their assessment of Scotland's credit rating. In addition to that point, the decision not to abolish the Energy Profits Levy will have disastrous consequences in the north east of Scotland, and the Labour Party will have to own those consequences, and we will make sure that they do. And in relation to the points on on energy prices, individuals were promised a cut of their energy bills of £300, and that is not happening under the Labour government.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Rachel Reeves yesterday made the same mistake as John Swinney with a Benefits Street budget, which increased tax on workers, pensioners and savers. The Scottish Benefits Bill is set to soar to close to £10 billion by the end of this decade. How does John Swinney intend to pay for that? First Minister.
The Scottish Government will set out its budget in January, which will, of course, follow in the pattern of all the budgets that we've set out have been a balanced budget. That is why, because of all these years of balanced budgets under the SNP government since 2007, Standard & Poor's are able to say that Scotland benefits from prudent financial management, and Standard & Poor's are able to say Scotland benefits from prudent financial planning. I would have thought the credit rating agencies, these independent voices who comment on economies around the world, would be some solace, some comfort to Mr Hoy. It might give him something to be cheerful about, that we've got such strong financial planning that even Mr Hoy should be satisfied with our performance.
Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Of course, it would be churlish not to welcome the about turn on the two-child benefit cap. Better late than never. And that, of course, benefits the children and families. But what it also does is it puts money into the local economy, because that money helps people pay for inflationary food, inflationary energy. So it's a good thing all round.
First Minister.
Yes, and it also complements the work that the government is doing, the Scottish Government is doing on the Scottish Child Payment, for example, where we're putting money directly into the household finances, which enables families to spend locally, to have more control over their resources and better able to support their families. And that's exactly the type of impact that will be felt in Christine Graham's constituency, as it will be in constituencies of the length and breadth of Scotland.
Question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government plans to commemorate the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, last Friday I launched the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence in my own constituency in Perth City. And ministers will take part in a national leadership event, a vigil, a parliamentary debate and visit local projects. Tackling gender-based violence is not a commitment for only 16 days, it is a commitment for 365 days. That is why we will continue to implement our Equally Safe strategy, which focuses on prevention and is backed by £21.6 million of expenditure for this current financial year.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Presiding Officer, I want to start by welcoming representatives from Women's Rights Network Scotland, Byra's Place and survivors of domestic abuse to the Parliamentary Gallery. Today, we held a vigil outside the Parliament, remembering the 46 women who have been killed by men in Scotland in the past 5 years. Behind every statistic is a real-life story of a woman whose future has been erased and whose family has been shattered. Shockingly, these statistics are continuing to rise. Presiding Officer, the latest figures show almost 64,000 incidents of domestic abuse recorded by Police Scotland, while at the same time there has been an 11% increase in reported rape cases. And not to forget grooming gangs operating in Scotland that the SNP Scottish Government want to believe are not a problem, instead are sticking their heads in the sand. So will the First Minister finally commit to backing my Prevention of Domestic Abuse Scotland bill, which will better monitor perpetrators and prevent potential victims from becoming victims in the first place? And will he do the right thing and agree to the grooming gangs inquiry so we can uncover the true scale of abuse of women and girls that are occurring in Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there are many issues raised by Pam Gossel, so I would be grateful if I could give very serious issues to which I would like to give substantial answers. First thing I want to say is I want to welcome the groups that are here and commend them for their courage and commemorate the 46 women who have been killed by men. Every single woman that is killed by a man in our society is totally unacceptable as a crime, and it appalls all of us, regardless of our politics. The second point I want to raise is in relation to the question of the bill that Pam Gossel has brought forward. The Government will engage constructively on this bill. We have already legislated through different measures. The Criminal Justice Modernisation and Abusive Domestic Behaviour Review Scotland Act is one example, and the previous domestic abuse legislation to strengthen the legislative position so that there is absolutely no tolerance of domestic violence in our society. Now, on the question of grooming gangs, this is a very complex issue to which the Government is giving very detailed consideration. On Monday, along with the Justice and Education Secretaries and the Minister for Children and Young People, I was briefed by Police Scotland and by the National Childhood Sexual Exploitation Group about the prevalence of these issues in Scotland. Yesterday, the National Group met to review these issues, and I have personally conducted a discussion with Professor Alexis Jay on these issues. Now, I hope all of these details that I have put on the record today will give Pam Gossel and colleagues in Parliament the confidence and the assurance that the Government is looking in detail at all of these questions. Nobody is putting their head in the sand. This has been looked at in detail because there are complexities about the interaction on the call that has been made for us on this issue with the child abuse inquiry that we have already statutorily established So there are no straightforward ways through this issue, but I assure Parliament that the Government is giving every serious consideration to this important issue.
Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Prevention of male violence in all its forms is preferable, both morally and practically. This session we have an opportunity to legislate to tackle male demand for prostitution and really disrupt a trade in women and girls that's both a cause and a consequence of violence. Does the First Minister agree that we must do all we can to ensure this legislation is fit for purpose and passes so that we can finally make good on a policy position that we've held for decades? That prostitution is violence against women and we will not accept the harm it causes for a second longer.
First Minister.
President Officer, as the Victims Minister made clear to the Justice Committee last week, whilst the Scottish Government strongly support the principle of legislating to criminalise those who purchase sex, we retain a neutral stance on the prostitution bill. It is clear that a number of stakeholders have voiced concerns about the safety of women, and it is paramount that legislation put forward to this Parliament must be safe for women involved in and exiting prostitution and recognise online exploitation. This is paramount alongside a number of other issues within the bill that the committee has heard about and must be addressed by the member in charge of this bill is to have the confidence of Parliament. And I assure Ruth Maguire of the sustained and detailed attention and engagement of the Government in taking forward this legislation and contributing to the discussion about addressing these issues.
Ash Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. One of the only areas of gender-based violence that is condoned currently by the Scottish Government is the violence of prostitution. Now, I welcome the Government's support for the qualified support for the principle of my unbuyable bill, which will give police the powers that they need to close this gap in the law. But will the First Minister meet with me and a group of survivors so that he can hear firsthand the horrible realities of prostitution?
First Minister.
As Ash Regan properly sets out, the Government is engaging constructively on this bill. I'll be very happy for the Minister responsible to engage with Ash Regan and with others on this bill. But there are, as I said in my response to Ruth Maguire, and I say this out of a desire to be helpful in this respect, there are challenging issues within the bill that we have to address properly to make sure the legislation can be applied, and that will be the process the Government will engage in.
Question number 6, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the First Minister, in light of ExxonMobil's announcement of the closure of the Mossmorton ethylene plant, what action the Scottish Government is taking to mitigate any damage this will cause to the Cowdenbeath area and to the wider Scottish economy?
First Minister.
President Officer, I want to reiterate my deep disappointment and concern at this decision and assure the workforce at the Fife ethylene plant that the Scottish Government is committed to doing whatever it can to safeguard the jobs there and secure an industrial future for the site. The Deputy First Minister has engaged extensively with all those with an interest in supporting the workforce and the local economy at Mossmorton, including the trade unions, workforce representatives, Fife Council and the United Kingdom Government, which holds the levers for an industrial intervention of the scale that we have seen in England and Wales. We have also joined partners, including Fife Council, in calling for a pause to the closure to ensure that all options to secure the industrial future of the site have been exhausted. And I welcome the participation of Mr Rowley in the discussions on Monday.
Alec Rowley.
Firstly, Presiding Officer, I would want to acknowledge the hard work and professionalism shown by the Deputy First Minister in mobilising the key stakeholders that will be required to begin to deal with the impact of this announcement. I attended a meeting on Tuesday at Fife College where ExxonMobil were very clear that the feed to the site will be shut off in February and that the closure will go ahead as announced. So can I ask the First Minister, where Fife Council will chair the task force that has been set up, does he acknowledge that if we are to achieve a new industrial future at Mossmorton, creating significant opportunities in skills and employment, then the Scottish Government will have to play a major role in coordinating that response? And does the First Minister accept that in order to address the impact of the closure, we must see substantial investment from both the UK and Scottish Government?
First Minister.
First of all, President Officer, let me correct the fact I referred to Monday when in fact the meeting was on Tuesday. But regardless, I welcome Mr Rowley's participation in that discussion. Let me confirm to Mr Rowley that the Scottish Government will be an active and critical player in the response in Mossmorran. We will engage, as Mr Rowley and I have worked together long enough to remember engagements previously on issues in relation to previous industrial closures in the 5 communities that he has championed, and we will do that again in this case and work collaboratively with Fife Council. Obviously, Scottish Enterprise have a lot to contribute to this process, with many projects emerging out of the work that's been undertaken on a preparatory basis in Grangemouth. That full intelligence will be available to the group in Mossmorran, and I obviously recognise that there will be resource implications of all that's involved, which the Government will consider as part of our budget process.
Thank you. Move to constituency and general supplementaries. Concise questions. Give more members concise questions and responses. Give more members a chance to take part. I call Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Whisky Association has warned that the Chancellor's decision to further increase duty on the Scotch whisky will put additional pressure on a sector already suffering job losses, stalled investment and business closures. Does the First Minister agree that this was the wrong decision, given the challenges facing the industry, and can he highlight what the Scottish Government is doing to support the sector?
First Minister.
President Officer, the issues that Mr MacDonald raises are very important and significant, and the disparity in alcohol duty that should have been addressed in the budget went unheard. There is now going to be a rise in duty rates of 18% in 3 years. This is an important sector to the Scottish economy, and obviously, as Mr MacDonald will be aware, I've worked assiduously over the summer to try to ensure that one of the other issues that presents challenges to the Scotch whisky industry, which is the tariffs applied by the United States, were to be resolved. I await the outcome of the United Kingdom Government's approach on this question, and I'm becoming increasingly concerned that no solution has been offered, despite the hard work that has been put in on this issue. But I do recognise that the industry is operating in a very challenging environment, and the Scottish Government will support it in any way it can.
Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Scottish sports governing bodies are collectively saying that they're increasingly unable to deliver core functions due to a continuing squeeze on their funding. Not only are increasing numbers of competitors being asked to pay for representing the country, projects designed to increase participation opportunities reaching out into our communities, especially in the most deprived areas, are being cut. First Minister, there is much talk of improving the nation's health through early intervention and prevention. Surely physical activity is the very essence of improving physical and mental health. So can I ask if it is the intention of the Scottish Government to honour their manifesto pledge from 2021 to double the sports budget by the end of this parliamentary term?
First Minister.
So I've received correspondence from a number of sports organisations on this important question, and I acknowledge the centrality of the points that Mr Whittle makes and the necessity for investment, and the Government is investing in the sport and active living budget £46.43 million. And we're obviously operating in constrained financial circumstances, and we will do all that we can to boost the funding available for sport. I don't want to sour these exchanges, but I would point out to Mr Whittle that his party leader has just demanded that I use £150 million for a tax cut. Yeah. And Mr Whittle, Mr Whittle is shouting at me, spend to save. The money has to be available to spend in the first place. Absolutely. And that comes about by constructive engagement about the budget. And the Conservatives have voted against the budget last year. I don't know what they're going to do this year, but I do encourage Parliament to come to considered conclusions about the priorities in the budget, and the Government will be willing to engage with members on that question.
Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister may be aware of the case of Leo Husman, who recently completed an optometry course at UHI. Leo is a British citizen who lived abroad with his family, but they were forced to flee to Scotland, but because they're British citizens are not considered refugees. The Scottish Government allow universities to waive higher and university fees for migrants and refugees who seek humanitarian protection. Leo has paid home tuition fees to UHI, but they're now asking for £23,000 as an overseas student in order that he can graduate. He's a job lined up and a supportive employer, but simply doesn't have £23,000. If he does not graduate, his 4 years in university will be totally worthless and his skills will be lost to Scotland. Leo has written to the First Minister, and I'm asking the First Minister today if he will intervene simply to allow Leo to graduate so that his qualification doesn't go to waste.
First Minister.
I haven't seen that correspondence yet, but I'll ask my office when I return there after First Minister's questions to put that to me. I'll look at that case and see it. Rhoda Grant makes a completely reasonable and understandable point. When I look at ophthalmology waiting lists, then more optometrists might actually be quite handy. So I'll have a look at the issue and do what I can to help.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today, people across Aberdeen and the North East are worried about their jobs, their families and the future of their communities. Investment in the North Sea is at a record low, and a Robert Gordon University report states jobs are being lost at 1,000 a month. Despite the swathe of warnings from experts, Labour failed to scrap the energy profits levy this week and remained wedded to this tax on the North East. Does the First Minister share my concern that Labour's choices will cost jobs and drive a more rapid decline in the North Sea? And what steps will his government take to preserve skills, save jobs and ensure a truly just transition?
First Minister.
As I've indicated already, I'm deeply disappointed that the energy profits levy remains in place. I think it is deeply damaging to the prospects of employment and opportunity in the North East of Scotland. The Scottish Government is putting in place support to the tune of more than £120 million invested in the North East through our Just Transition and Energy Transition Fund to support the region's transition, and we will continue to be steadfast supporters of that transition in the North East and supporting the communities as they face a very challenging situation that's been made worse by the preservation of the energy profits levy.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Forth Valley Health Board Maternity Services at Larbert is the latest maternity service to receive a damning report from an unannounced inspection. The report highlighted that mothers were being put at serious risk and that some had to wait up to 62 hours to be induced. Therefore, what is the Scottish Government doing to ensure that lessons are learned from this report and that safeguards are put in place to protect mothers and their unborn babies as a matter of urgency?
First Minister.
The purpose of the review reports that have been done into every maternity service in the country is to make sure that these practices are actively challenged, so they can be improved. And that is what is underway. That's why Forth Valley has been inspected. It is, I think, the third inspection that has been undertaken. And if I look at the example in Tayside, which was the first investigation, many of the recommendations that have been made in relation to service in Tayside have now been implemented, and that will be the position in Forth Valley.
Jackie Bailey.
A report this week by Hospice UK found 2/3 of hospices in Scotland have made cuts or are planning to do so within the next year due to financial pressures. Every time there are salary rises in the NHS, hospice staff do not directly benefit, and therefore there are pressures on recruitment and retention. At the same time as the Scottish Government is considering the funding of proposals for assisted dying, can I ask the First Minister, does he share my view that we should assist hospices with funding of salaries to the same level as the NHS in future?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on the question about hospice costs, I'm very sympathetic to this point. In July of this year, £5 million funding was distributed to support independent hospices to deliver pay parity for clinical staff with their NHS counterparts. So that's the government intervening to do exactly that. Now, of course, what's difficult for hospices is when they get surprises, like employers' national insurance contribution increases, because that puts up the costs of employment. And Jackie Bailey raised with me the financial pressures, and that bluntly is where some of the financial pressures are coming from. Now, I very much want to do all that we can to support the hospice movement. I have enormous respect for the movement. I think the issues in relation to hospice care and palliative care are central to the human rights of individuals in our society. Jackie Bailey knows that my public position, this is a personal position, it's not the government's position. I am opposed to the assisted dying legislation, and I don't think it's appropriate for the issues of palliative care and assisted dying to be in any way connected. I think they are very separate issues, because the rights to palliative care for individuals in our society are absolute, and we should do all we can to support the sector, and the government will do all that it can in that respect.
Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Monday is World AIDS Day, and despite huge progress across the world in the development of treatments to prevent and manage HIV, we cannot fully rest in our efforts until a permanent vaccine is universally available across the world. Scotland has, of course, signed up to the ambition to eliminate all new cases of HIV by 2030, and I'm pleased to say that we are making very good progress on that, but it is that last cohort of people living with HIV with complex cases who will be both the hardest to find but also to treat, First Minister. So can I ask if the Government is fully committed to further rolling out opt-out testing for HIV, universal access to PrEP in Scotland, but also recommit his Government to that shared ambition that Scotland can and probably should become the first place in the world to eradicate all new cases in the next 4 years?
First Minister.
I welcome Mr Green's question, and I warmly recommit the Government to that objective by 2030. The operational plans that are being delivered to achieve that are, as I think Mr Green fairly states, are on track. There is good progress that is being made, but we have to sustain that focus to make sure that we can achieve that objective. I think it is part of a global effort, and we only succeed in global efforts if we start here and addressing the issues here. The one other factor I would add is that we also must tackle stigma, because there is still too much stigma around HIV, and as a tolerant, respectful and courteous society, we should do all that we can to eliminate the stigma around HIV as we work together to achieve the objectives that Mr Green has put to me today.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Jackson Carlaw, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.
Thank you. Could I please ask our guests who are leaving the chamber in the gallery, who have been most welcome to attend our Parliament, your Parliament, to do so quickly and quietly, because in fact we're about to go into the next item of business and we need some quiet for that. Thank you very much for your cooperation. So, in fact, the next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 19510 in the name of Jackson Carla on Glasgow City Council's plans for an at-city boundary congestion charge and a toll on using the Clyde Tunnel. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Jackson Carla to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank those members who have been generous enough to lend their support to my motion today, and can I say how delighted I am to see Fiona Hislop in her chair to respond to it today, because I hope this will give her the opportunity for redemption, to redeem herself after the casual way she brushed aside my inquiry, which is the direct reason why this debate has been tabled today. When I asked her about this just a few weeks ago, and she said, I think, words to the effect that the Tories are in favour of localism, this was nothing to do with her, and washed her hands of the whole affair. And I hope that's not going to be her attitude today. Well, in some ways, maybe I should hope that will be her attitude today, because it has so offended all of my constituents in Eastwood that it's done wonders for my re-election prospects next May. And I don't know, maybe that was her intention. And if it was, well, of course I will be eternally grateful. But I would far rather she called out the reckless disregard for the damage that her colleagues in SNP-led Glasgow City Council could be wreaking upon the public by pursuing this policy, and also that she will give proper consideration to the wider long-term consequences that may follow as a result of this action were other councils to follow suit. Because what Glasgow have proposed is not, as some people have now got used to, a charge for LEZ for heavy fuel inefficient vehicles. They are talking about an at-city boundary congestion charge. They are asking constituents, not just from my local authority, but from all the neighbouring local authorities, to flash their digital passports as they seek to cross the city boundary into Glasgow. Those people who are attending healthcare appointments at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. Those people who are going to work in the city. Those people are hoping to bring some sort of income into the city. And in my case, those people who are crossing the road, potentially, or just up the street to get to Sainsbury's, to get their shop, will now have to pay a boundary charge for the privilege of having done so. People in East Renfrewshire, in Renfrewshire, in Western Bartonshire, in North Lanarkshire and in South Lanarkshire are those who are most likely to be the those who are heaviest impacted. However, the charge would apply to every person in Scotland, every person who does not live in Glasgow when they cross the council boundary, i.e. a driver who is resident in the Borders or Dumfries and Galloway councils would be charged for entering Glasgow when they crossed into the city from one of the neighbouring local authorities. Drivers who are resident in one of the other 31 local authorities would be charged for every car journey to Glasgow, including for work, as I said, for healthcare, as I said, for education or for social and family reasons, while Glasgow residents would be exempt. Presiding Officer, what have people had to say about this prospective charge? The Chief Executive of Glasgow Chamber of Commerce has said we cannot support a citywide congestion charge, particularly until improvements in public transport have been made, which was his reason for objecting it.